Hi, I'm Mr. Franklin, and this is the explanation video on video notes and our minimum expectation for those. So the purpose of video notes is of taking notes in general, is to learn new information, reinforce old information, write it down so we can remember it. So for you as a student, the goal of making you take video notes is so you can learn the material, so that you have a resource to study and think from. We also want you to learn how to study more deeply, because most of you probably take notes and you just write the stuff down and you don't actually use it. So we are going to be working on actually using our notes with a purpose to study. So our expectations: you must take the notes. Always get questions of, do I need to write this down? Yes, you need to write it down. If you're not sure, write it down. Because it's a video, you can pause the video, you can rewind, and you can write it down. If there are illustrations, you should draw the illustrations. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and especially with physics, and even more so with some of the complex physics things we're going to be talking about, you need a picture in your mind, a mental picture, to understand what's going on. It'll just make things so much easier for you. Physics deals with a lot of math. We are going to be keeping the math simple. We're only going to be doing one variable of algebra, basically, but we are going to be calculating things like slope and all kinds of stuff. So you need to write the equations and the math problems, and you need to write down all of it. You should not skip any steps. When you are finished with your notes, summarize your notes. Do a summary of what those notes were about. Go back and annotate your notes. I have a specific system that I'm going to ask you to use. Your other teachers may have a system that they want you to use as well. What note taking is not. It's not a just copy this down. It's also not something you skip. Something that some students get really hung up about is making their notes perfectly neat. If I make a mistake in my notes, I draw a single line through the mistake, because sometimes the mistake was not a mistake and it's important information and I need to be able to read the mistake. It also shows my thinking when I do that, and that can be important. Now, ultimately, how you manage that is up to you, but I don't want you stressing about how neat your notes are, as long as you get everything down and done and you can read them. I'm going to recommend paper notes because of the math component that we're going to be exploring in physics. It's much easier to work with math on paper than it is on our digital tools. Yes, there are some digital tools that do some math stuff for us, but they're not as easy to take notes with. I recommend that if you do it on paper, you keep it organized. You keep all your physics notes together. You don't mix up your notes. That's one reason why I actually prefer a composition book, because you have one little book. Let's say it's the red book, because you can get them in different colors, and that's your physics book. And so everything that's physics is in that book. It's easy to find. So my suggestion. Because of Avid at our school, and I think most of our teachers do push Focus and Cornell notes, that's what I'm going to recommend. I personally use talking paper style, but that's because I didn't learn Focus notes until I became a teacher. And all through my high school and military career, I did a talking paper style of taking notes. So that's also a valid way to do it. But the key is going to be going back after you've taken the notes and summarize your notes, ask questions of the notes, and mark things that you need clarification on. You know what? He said this in the video and I have no clue what that means. Or I know this is part of it, but he didn't mention it, so I need to ask that question. But you also need a summary of your notes. Those are more important necessarily than the actual format that you use. Later on, I will be providing a video for you, a link to the video I've made about Focus notes and Cornell notes. Some students need to take notes digitally, and you're going to type it in Google Docs. And that should just be a handful of you. And that really is, if your handwriting is so bad that you really can't read it, I recommend that you do take digital notes. However, when we get to the math stuff, you should be working on the math on paper, because it'll just be easier to do. Okay. If you are taking digital notes, I recommend Google Docs. You may use Google Slides, but Google Docs is going to be easier. If you're going to do the Focus notes, insert a table, 2 columns, 3 rows, and it'll set up in the basic format. You can resize them, and I can show you that later. I actually recommend a talking paper style if you're doing digital notes, but the key is still going to be going back in that document, because you can highlight in Google Docs, you can put comments and mark up your text. Okay, so that's going to be the key for your notes. So talking paper style, real briefly, is this. It's basically you put a dash for the main idea, a double dash for a supporting idea, and you can have as many subpoints as you want. There is no magic number. So like right down here, I have 1 subpoint. Here I have 3. Subpoints are details supporting the point above it. So this subpoint matches this one, and this subpoint supports that one. I like this when I'm preparing presentations. That's why it's called a talking paper, because if you do it correctly, you can speak from it very quickly. So especially if you use keywords, okay? So this is the basic format for a talking paper. There's definitely a lot more fancy ways to do it. The key point is organization, make it readable so that we can tell what you're writing down and talking about. Last thing with notes is we are going to expect to see your notes. We're going to be checking your notes for accuracy and completion, and because that's going to be what you're studying from, and you need to have that done to a high degree of accuracy. All right, that's all I've got. If you have any questions, please contact your teacher, and have a great day.